On 23rd April, the peaceful tourist destination in Kashmir Valley turned into a site of national tragedy. The images from Pahalgam still haunt us. This terror attack has once again pushed India-Pakistan relations to a breaking point. Beyond the immediate horror of the attack lies a significant diplomatic development. India's decision to suspend the Indus Waters Treaty, a cornerstone agreement that has withstood over 6 decades of hostility between the two nations. In today's deep dive, we will not just be analyzing policy, but examining how this tragedy has fundamentally altered the relationship of two nuclear neighbors who share not just borders but rivers, history, and centuries of both cultural connection and conflict. In this deep dive, we'll explore first the human cost of terrorism and how it drives foreign policy decisions. Second, the historical pattern of India-Pakistan relations and why this moment is different. Third, how the Indus Waters Treaty suspension represents a new era in bilateral relations. 1. When terrorism transforms foreign policy. To understand the seismic shift in India's approach to Pakistan, we must first acknowledge the raw human tragedy that triggered it. Consider the timeline. India held elections in Kashmir. Tourism was flourishing, and the region was showing signs of recovery after years of unrest. The Pahalgam attack's timing was not coincidental. It was calculated to disrupt this progress and maintain instability in Kashmir Valley. But this is hardly the first terrorist attack with Pakistani connections. From Parliament in 2001 to Mumbai in 2008, Uri in 2016 to Pulwama in 2019. What makes this attack particularly significant is that it marks the first major terrorist strike targeting civilians in nearly 25 years. This incident has pushed India-Pakistan relations toward greater hostility. But something feels different this time, a sense that India has reached its final breaking point. Why? Because despite decades of dialogue, treaties, and attempts at normalization, the fundamental pattern has not changed. Pakistan's military establishment continues to view terrorist proxies as strategic assets against India, while simultaneously denying any connection to these groups. For Indian policymakers, this attack confirmed that Pakistan's assurances about controlling terror groups remain empty promises. And this realization has driven a fundamental reassessment of how India engages with its neighbor. The Indus Waters Treaty, when the unbreakable breaks. The most striking evidence of this reassessment is India's decision to suspend the Indus Waters Treaty, a 1960 agreement that had remained intact through 3 wars and countless crises. To appreciate the significance of this move, we need to understand what the treaty represents. When India and Pakistan gained independence in 1947, they inherited a complex challenge of managing shared rivers that nourished both nations. The partition boundary cut right across the Indus Basin, leaving Pakistan downstream and vulnerable to potential water manipulation. After years of negotiation, the Indus Waters Treaty created a solution that allocated the eastern rivers, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj, to India, and the western rivers like Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab primarily to Pakistan. While not perfect, this arrangement provided certainty in an otherwise unpredictable relationship. For 65 years, this treaty functioned as the last standing bridge between hostile neighbors. Even when diplomatic relations collapsed and armies faced off at the border, water cooperation continued. It represented a tacit understanding that certain domains remained beyond political conflict, recognition that water security transcended other disagreements. But that era is now over. By suspending the treaty, India has signaled that no aspect of bilateral relations is immune from the consequences of terrorism. This represents a fundamental paradigm shift in how India approaches Pakistan. What practical leverage does this give India? First, India can now operate its reservoirs without seasonal restrictions, potentially affecting water flow during Pakistan's critical agricultural periods. Second, dam designs no longer need to accommodate Pakistani objections. A major shift considering Pakistan has challenged almost every hydroelectric project India has proposed on western rivers. Third, flood data sharing obligations end, depriving Pakistan of critical information for disaster management during monsoon season. Fourth, storage restrictions on western rivers no longer apply, allowing India to develop new water management infrastructure. For Pakistan, where agriculture represents 20% of GDP and employs over 40% of the workforce, these changes aren't just administrative, they are existential. Pakistan already faces severe water stress, with per capita availability plummeting from 5,600 cubic meters at independence to below 1,000 cubic meters today. Pakistani officials have previously described water security as vital enough that threats to it could constitute acts of war, revealing just how central this resource is to Pakistan's national security calculus. The decision to suspend the treaty also carries long-term geopolitical risks that extend beyond the bilateral relationship with Pakistan, as China might leverage this precedent against India in the future. As the upstream riparian power controlling major rivers like the Brahmaputra that flow into India, China could cite India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty as justification for similar actions. This represents a significant strategic vulnerability for India, as water insecurity could affect its northeastern states just as India's actions now affect Pakistan. New India-Pakistan relationship. What comes next? Having examined both the human tragedy that triggered this shift and the significance of the treaty suspensions, let's explore what this means for the future of India-Pakistan relations. The treaty suspension is just one element of India's comprehensive response. The government has also closed the Atari-Wagah border crossing, cancelled visa exemptions for Pakistani nationals, reduced diplomatic presence in both countries, and declared certain Pakistani diplomatic staff persona non grata. Together, these measures represent what security experts call a calibrated escalation. Here, pressure applied across multiple domains to maximize impact while avoiding immediate military confrontation that could spiral into uncontrolled escalation between nuclear powers. This approach reflects India's evolving strategic doctrine. Previous attacks prompted direct military responses, including surgical strikes after Uri and airstrikes following Pulwama. While those demonstrated India's willingness to use force, they also carried inherent escalation risks. The current strategy targets Pakistan's core vulnerabilities, including economic fragility, diplomatic isolation, and resource insecurity without immediate kinetic action. It's designed to impose sustained cost rather than theatrical but temporary pressure. The timing appears deliberate. Pakistan faces unprecedented challenges such as economic collapse requiring IMF bailouts, political instability, Taliban pressure on its western border, and growing international skepticism about its counter-terrorism commitments. For Pakistan military establishment, this creates an impossible dilemma. They have long presented themselves as guardians against Indian aggression. The treaty suspension forces them to either accept this significant blow to sovereignty or respond in ways that could further isolate Pakistan internationally. Notice this careful legal framing of India's announcement. The treaty is in abeyance until Pakistan credibly and irrevocably abjures its support for cross-border terrorism. This creates a clear pathway back to normalcy while placing responsibility entirely on Pakistan to demonstrate changed behavior. For Indian policymakers, this represents a calculated move. By suspending rather than abrogating the treaty, India maintains flexibility to restore the agreement if Pakistan takes concrete steps against terror groups. Yet it also signals unprecedented willingness to reconsider even the most fundamental aspects of the bilateral relationship. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in India-Pakistan relations, we must remember that behind policy decisions are human lives, both those lost in Pahalgam and those who will be affected by the changing relationship between these nuclear neighbors. The suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty marks the end of an era where terrorism and bilateral cooperation could exist in separate compartments. India has made clear that Pakistan cannot expect business as usual in any domain, diplomatic, economic, or hydrological, while supporting groups that target Indian civilians. This doesn't mean dialogue is impossible. In fact, the conditional nature of the suspension creates a framework for potential re-engagement, but only if Pakistan takes verifiable steps against terror infrastructure on its soil. The question now is whether this new approach can succeed where previous strategies have failed, compelling meaningful change in Pakistan's security establishment while preventing dangerous escalation between nuclear-armed neighbors. Thank you for watching. Please share this deep dive to create more awareness of this critical turning point in regional security.